Welcome to the Prompton Podcast, the podcast where we separate market myths and mortgage meltdowns and decode the fine print of real estate so you don't have to. I'm your host, James Walker, here to guide you through the twists and turns and occasional real estate horror stories. I'm here with Brian Higgins of YVR Global Real Estate.
Thank you, James. If you're wondering who I am, I've been a realtor here at Prompton for almost 13 years, predominantly in the Vancouver West market, so I can probably bring some good insight and likely some good stories along the way.
And the mortgage broker with the most knowledge, James DeVoost.
Thank you, James. I've been a mortgage broker for 15 years with Team DeVoost Mortgage Professionals.
So, what's new, guys? What's going on?
2025. Everyone's trying to survive.
Survive 2025. Anybody watch Four Nations hockey?
Absolutely. Big game
game
tomorrow.
Yeah. You think they're going to take it?
I think Canada actually may take it. I think they'll come back from the dead.
You think so?
Yeah, or they better fight better than they did.
Well, there's been all that injury talk going through the America's locker room, and they're all banging their knees on cupboards and whatever they're doing, and Austin Matthews has a little boo-boo on his knee, so it's great.
Trying to get Quinn Hughes up, but they won't.
Exactly. Okay, so what we do every week here is weekday, whatever we do, whatever we choose, we're kind of free that way, is we're going to go and get industry specialists, Brian, James, whoever else we choose, and we take you through real estate news and what's going on in the city of Vancouver, world beyond. Do we want to talk about the United States at this point?
I think it's top of mind for everybody.
I don't think you can avoid it even
Can't
if you
avoid
want
it.
to.
Every article.
Start with the news articles. First one we're going to have is, it was done by, who is it, Global News or?
Vancouver Sun.
Vancouver Sun? Someone.
Yeah.
They're talking about the 40-year wait to develop Vancouver's expo lands and call it unacceptable. So, take us away. What do you think about this little news article? James, you were pretty fired up on it yesterday.
Yeah, I think that when you have a government go out and essentially call a developer unacceptable, it is new territory for government. I mean, the reality that this government, the NDP, just don't realize is that private property is private property. It's not public property. And they're not doing anything but taxing things or making it difficult for developers to build because there's all these requirements. We have the building code updates, which are, when we were at the UDI lunch, they basically said it makes it infeasible to build buildings with all of these requirements. So I think it's kind of interesting coming from, a former hockey player with 7 years of banking experience where he gets to tell a developer that it's unacceptable to build on their own property. Yeah. So I think it's quite shocking.
I agree. Now, they also don't take into account that if you owned a property yourself, let's say you live in, I'm not going to say where you live, but around. He lives in somewhere. And you had a road going through the back of your property, and you want to rebuild your home. And the government agreed that they'll remove that road 10 years ago. Why would you build until that road is removed? And this is the viaducts.
Well, you wouldn't.
Right?
Yeah.
So why would you bother? Why would you lose 15% of your land just to go stick sign up to appease?
But where's the incentive?
Exactly.
Like it's saying, well, I'll remove the road, but I'll do it in my time, and then when I don't do it, I'll blame you for it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just typical NDP style of government. Blame, and then we'll just tax the solution to death, and hopefully it figures itself out. But I mean, it's just in general, if the province hasn't made any effort to remove the viaducts, let alone the nightmare that's just going to cause down here, and then tell a developer it's unacceptable, and then come out in the paper saying, well, we're willing to take legal action. I mean, that is the definition of appropriation.
Yeah.
Right? It's saying, well, you own land, but not really, because, we don't like what you're doing with it. I mean, it's a wild, bordering on communism, Marxism. It's crazy, and nobody is really, coming up, calling this completely unacceptable behavior, because I think last time I checked, the province doesn't have a development team. So why don't you try to befriend developers if you need housing so bad, instead of vilify them and lambaste them in the paper? I think it's absolutely unacceptable on his part.
You think they're still sore from selling this for like $30 million?
No, it's so far gone. But you realize that when the site does get dredged, the taxpayers still pay the dollars on the contaminated soil.
Yeah.
I mean, Li Ka-shing, when he struck that deal on the Expo lands, he was probably one of the best businessmen in Asia, the wealthiest man in Asia at the time. And then you look at now, yes, the viaducts, proposals were done back in 2016. Even Concord is offering to pay $110 million towards that $400 million demolition cost of the viaducts. The other developer I believe it's Aquilini, the two of them are going to eat 50% of the cost on the city.
That was in 2018 before we had crazy inflation.
But now they're pegging it at 400, and the developers have come through recently and basically said we're going to come up with the better part of 50% of those costs, right? And then it's difficult because it's like we've also had the view cone. So think of City of Vancouver, what could have been built there based on view cone guidelines. If those view guidelines have since changed, the density changes as well. So it's difficult because it's multifaceted. I mean, if you look through the downtown core, I'd be screaming more about view cones than I would be about 15% left of one parcel that Concord hasn't built yet when they built 85% of the lands.
But you're like the 1% of the population understands view cones?
But there's a bench on Charleston Park where if somebody's sitting on that bench, has to see the lions. So there's buildings that are built down Homer that are sloped all the way up so that somebody sitting on a bench on the other side of Falls Creek can see the lions. So instead of having 26,000 more condos through that view cone, there's 26,000 less condos because somebody sitting on this bench should be able to see the lions.
Well, at least you can see the lions, though. Look at the benefit
Right.
of that,
Benefit
right?
efficiency.
Yeah, there you go. At its best. So, correct me if I'm wrong, though, too, and I might be wrong on this, although I spout nonsense all the time. If the viaducts are there, and not to get too dark, but we are expected a big, giant earthquake one day, and with our new billion-dollar St. Paul's Hospital now relocated, how are you going to have viaducts supported by, I'm sure they're concrete, earthquake-proof pillars, supporting viaducts going to your major health?
And that was the big concern. We lived right nearby. When they were doing that study, it was all about the seismic, right? So the seismic stability of the viaducts and what it would cost to upgrade them to make them seismically stable. And the reality of the time of the study was it's cheaper to pull them off and remove them.
So has this not been done yet?
No.
Oh, great.
Yeah, this is going. That was 2016. It's
Fantastic.
2025.
This is well spent money. This is good. This is good that he called them out and said it was unacceptable.
Right?
Yeah. Makes
So
total
think
sense.
about it this way, though. When the St. Paul's Hospital site was sold on Burrard to Concord, right? It came down to between Concord and one other major developer. There's actually timelines on that. But when the land sale was done to Li Ka-shing back in the day on the Expo lands, there was no timeline on it. So it exactly your point earlier, James. I mean, it's a complete overstep from the housing minister to start pointing fingers at a developer. In the city of Vancouver, make it easier. Why do you think all the developers are building in Burnaby? I had a call with a builder this morning, and it's like Burnaby is open for business.
Yep.
If you're a duplex builder, if you're a fourplex builder, if you're a condo tower builder, all multifamily, Burnaby is open for business.
Well, if you've
Look at the amount of product that has been delivered in Burnaby compared to Vancouver in the last 5 or 6 years.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So
What hasn't built in Vancouver?
I think Cologne should be pointing the finger at City Hall and start realizing that this is not a developer play. This is also a civic issue, right? It's multifaceted.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. It's like we almost know what we're talking about here.
Right?
I know. Education-wise. Topic 2 in our news for today. One of the big things that James talks about all the time, and he understands it, and my eyes glaze over as soon as he starts to talk about it, is the declining interest rates. And are they the key to real estate renaissance? Brian, you've been active in the market for how long? How long you been a realtor?
Almost 13 years.
That's it?
Yeah. But investor since the early 2000s.
Okay. And how have you found the market so far getting back into it? I know we've got stats and graphs and stuff from CMHC and GVR and Toronto Real Estate Board. We could talk for hours about the stats and what they're telling us. But you as a active agent out there in the trenches, seeing it, are you feeling that buyers are getting a bit more active with the interest rate push down?
100%. When you look at last year in 2024, I mean, we doubled our production in the last 7 months of the year than we did in the first 5, right? So people were coming back to the market big time. We saw interest rate drops as of the summer, trending down. October was busy. November was busy. December was very busy. We were doing deals right up until December 30th. The variance right now, of course, is the tariff play. Because rates have come down once in January. James, will they come down again next month?
There's no doubt they will. I mean, the reality of what the Bank of Canada set out was they want to get to, they have a neutral rate of basically, not stimulating and not taking away from the economy, and that rate is 2.25 to 3%. Right now we're at 3. The reality, last year, as they stated, we want to get to 2.5. so we can bank on there's, March and April that there was going to be a cut. The only thing really throwing that out could potentially be job numbers, but even job numbers, I don't think will stop the shoring up of what they need to do. I mean, what I say to people is, like, we don't have a government. There is nobody driving the bus except for the Bank of Canada. As much as you see them in the paper, we're flying down to Washington, we're doing this. The reality is money makes the world go round. And if the Bank of Canada doesn't do something, they're going to get caught off their heels, and then they're going to have to do larger cuts, emergency cuts. And I think it's already in the cards. They're going down minimum 25 in March and April as well.
Do we give Canada Mortgage Trends newsletter any clout?
Yeah, I think they're a really good group.
They're saying Bank of Canada's March rate cut odds dropped to 30%. The latest inflation data.
It's right. Markets are banking in at 40 right now, but I think I think a lot of it's just headlines and people need something to chat about. We saw inflation go from 1.8 to 1.9. Okay, right, and what was the?
Weren't you saying that was gas the other day?
Well, it was gas. Gas prices were up 8.6%. So now we look at, okay, why are those? And Canada has a unique issue, is that we require U.S. refineries to give us a more clean burning summer blend of fuel. There was shutdowns. And that was the predominant driver. I mean, Manitoba, I think, saw something like a 30% or near 30% increase in gas. So, I mean, we can just look around in British Columbia, considered probably, no, it is the worst. We went from like 160-ish, and now we're sitting at like 184. I think we peaked at like 195. So it's a reality of, yeah, it's gas. I mean, other metrics, core inflation, it's sticky, but I don't think that's going to stop them from cutting. I really don't. Their target is 2%. We're at 1.9. But the reality of the tariffs is they're likely going to go ahead, and that will put Canada on.
Do you think they are?
On its heels?
Yeah,
Really?
100%. Really?
Yeah,
100%.
Don't just big bully push him
No,
around.
he's pushing bigger and bigger week after week right now.
Yeah.
So it's coming onto Europe. It's coming everywhere. He wants
What
to.
did that one comedian call us? The labradoodle of trade partners.
He wants to reshape global trade
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and tariffs are a way that he can push weight around.
Yeah, it's leverage.
I don't like even talk about them. Development. Now, new development is obviously something that we all live in. We all breathe in Vancouver and Burnaby and everything else. Do you think the interest rates and where we're at, do you think there's say it lightly, a hope in hell for new development in this 2025?
I don't think we're going to see any developer launch a new project until they know who's running the country for the next 4 years. I just don't see it. It's like, why would you want to do it? I mean, give you an example, in North Vancouver, there's one project up for pre-sale right now.
It's one.
One.
Okay.
And there was two that were canceled, returned deposits. The third allowed buyers who had purchased the units, great, you get to keep them. The rest of the building was converted into rental. So there's not a good environment for new development right now. There's too much uncertainty.
If you read Stories, which is it's one of the news article things around here. One of my favorite things about that is just seeing who's bankrupt now.
Oh yeah.
It's always like a fun thing to go through. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
and this development's bankrupt,
Yeah.
and this one's bankrupt.
Yeah.
We should actually do a game that somehow.
Yeah, the amount of
Yeah.
insolvencies during the inflationary period are far greater than what we saw in the 2008 U.S. recession.
100%. People are just getting crunched, and you see, there's one in the West End on Nelson Street that went down. It wasn't the biggest loan in the world. I forget what the amount was, but you see these compounded daily interest that people have to pay of $3,000 per day with these inflation.
$55,000 a day.
Well, sure, for some of the
when you
big
get the big
loans,
sites.
Yeah.
With the interest rates where they're at, with Vancouver's pricing point, do you feel that there is a pent-up demand, Brian, with what's going on? Do you feel like
There is a massive dam of buyers.
You think
Since
so?
we came out of the spring of 2022 and we went into the inflation period, a lot of people, our market is very much driven by the psychology of the mindset of the buyer. So at the end of the day, if they're comfortable transacting, they will transact. If they're not comfortable transacting, they will sit back. And then you look at the tariff play, now you've got the boomers that don't want to make any moves, so they're just comfortable, they're mortgage free, and they're just gonna sit there.
bought the house for 6 blueberries back in 19?
100%, yeah, $6,000 and it's worth, $1.8 million, and they're, they don't have
There's
a
so
drop
much
of
equity,
mortgage
they
on
don't
it.
even know what they got.
Exactly, but then the problem is, where do they go?
Where homeowners
right?
get approved.
Yeah. Oh, God.
So in all reality, I think you're going to see Rates, when they do come down, and once this tariff aspect is over, I think you're going to see a flood into the market like we haven't seen since the late 2021, early 2022.
So you're bullish on the 2025 residential market?
It's supply and demand. I mean, I remember when Rennie came out in 2016 and talked about the fact that we have a supply issue. And this was pre-foreign buyer tax, and the media lambasted him as being a real estate marketer. Well, the metrics show it. We're bringing in 65,000 new people a year to BC. There may have been a little bit less recently with some flow towards Calgary or into Edmonton or Alberta for that matter. But the reality is BC and Vancouver is still very much an intake area and population. And when you look around and we talk about the issues that the developers are having, we're not building new housing stock. So, if you go to any of the developer breakfasts and that, they say most of the stuff is not going to happen until 2028. Yep. So we're going to have this lack of new supply coming and a huge pent-up demand. So I think once we get through the election, whether it be later this fall or if we do get the snap election earlier, and through the tariff situation, at least that it's understood, I think you will see a wave of people into the market.
And I think to build on Brian's point there is, just factually, the baby boomers are getting near the end of their life.
Yes.
When you look at
healthcare now.
Well, they're straining the healthcare system. We have triage medical. I think we could call that in Canada. Get in a car accident, you get to the hospital, do anything preventative. Good luck. I got good stories on that.
Yep.
But the reality of
next episode.
Yeah, next episode. I mean, the reality of these baby boomers is we're looking at the largest transfer of wealth in human history, and the only way
$3 trillion in North America, Simon.
CIBC, I think it had $1 trillion a year, right? And we're kind of looking at these baby boomers saying, look, I don't need 3 acres or 2 acres in the British properties on a $10 million house. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to give the money to the kids as a living will. It's tax-free currently, and they got to do what they want to do, And this is the big talk of living will. It's because of when you die, capital gains are immediately realized. You have to pay them, so they're looking at saying, well, it's easier for me to disperse assets and see my kids get ahead than just to give 50% to the government, 67. Thank God that got overturned, but that's the reality of these wealthy individuals, and there is still a ton of wealth in British Columbia, especially in the baby boomer age bracket, and I think we're seeing that. We're seeing large down payments provided through gifts from these, from this group of people. So I just think it's going to get exacerbated and keep going, and it's going to create a market I don't think we've seen before because that factor has never been around.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Going on topic 3, and this is going to be a ongoing, consistent discussion because the pre-construction costs and the new marketing challenges. Me and James went to the UDI lunch with Concord Pacific, and it was great, and they were talking about it, and it really shed a light on the pre-construction costs, and we're trying to get more data and information on so we can have foregoing discussions about this. But it as we all know, our government is our government at this time. But, how much of a factor, and when we see the pre-construction struggles due to rise, high municipality fees and the GTA, it's $122,000 per apartment, and it's just getting a staggering amount, right? So when it comes to and although a developer takes us on the beginning and they take on, you're taking down the viaducts, for example. So the government's not going to step in. Do they think that money is just going to be spent, or do they think that money is going to go back into the development of Concord Pacific lands there?
The density offsets the cost at the end.
So?
The additional density, the opportunity for sure.
Yeah, but how do we think that is there a way? Do we just need government to step away from this? Do we just do you have any input on this on how government can step away from the pre-construction costs?
The problem, though, James, is that the government on all levels, be it municipal, provincial, and federal, have been bandits in real estate over the last 40 years, right? When you look at GST collected on new homes, when you look at land transfer tax in British Columbia, where it used to be 1% on their first 200,000 because 95% of the homes in the province were under 200,000. So that's why that first 200,000 mark is there. Now it's 3% between 2 and 3 million and 5% over 3 million. The government provincially collects billions of dollars annually from land transfer tax, and it goes into general revenue. None of that money is put back into building housing for those that need it. They look at the developers as being the big bandits of this, but the government, when you look at the billions and billions annually that they've reaped, where has that money gone?
Or
right?
more importantly, why is it not
sorry,
talked about?
But like City of Vancouver's CAC fees, you know, like when you look at the city's budget and go, okay, if we need housing built in the downtown east side for people that truly need housing and cannot afford it, where did this money just evaporate over 3 decades of, or at least 2 decades of condo boom in Vancouver, right?
Yeah.
If you think of the reurbanization of the downtown core, it started in the 90s. We're 2025. So we basically had 30 years of development, and you've had billions of dollars given out, and nothing was done with it.
Nothing.
Right, so now you have a couple
Bike
little
lanes.
housing sites that are going to get built, or you're hoping that CMHC is going to provide some of the smaller cap builders the opportunity to build some rental high rise.
Yeah.
Right, look at the wall tower on Richards. I mean, look at the density that you got up there. The developers couldn't get the density, but he got the density based on rental. But it's beyond difficult because you've had pilfering from government on all levels of taxes, and yet we're going to blame the private sector.
And I think that's the trend is government inefficiencies and their inability to manage budgets and be fiscally responsible. It's all of a sudden the private sector's problem. It's saying, well, you guys aren't building housing. Let's just tax you more. And they don't talk about that. Fiscal responsibility is crucial for government, but it's also crucial in order to build things.
It's also crucial for an economy to
Yeah,
grow.
and we're provincially we're running back-to-back largest deficits in the history of the province, and I will tell you there is no way to pay that back unless you fire up every single LNG plant that was canceled, and you start looking at something like Alberta where they have the you could call it a sovereign wealth fund, you could call it a heritage fund, that money from tax revenue is actually put into a fund for future years. We haven't done that. This is why we're in these massive deficits, and now they're looking, through media to blame the private sector. And I look at the private sector saying, you know what, if we put our feet in the sand, our head in the sand, and we don't build, good luck. Well, what are you going to do then?
Someone's got to build it. I think and we were at the UDI lunch that they said, you're vilifying the developer,
Yeah.
but like as you just said in the beginning of the podcast, the BC government, BC does not have a development crew. They're not running around with hard hats building towers and everything else. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Also, think of the amount of jobs that have been created in development over the years.
Yeah.
Right? Like my mentor found at ITC, you look at that. I mean, I'm sure throughout his career, he probably employed over 250,000 people.
Absolutely.
Right? Like over decades throughout Western Canada. So it's difficult because I think people forget the good things that are beneficial out of it. And it's easy on hit pieces to come out and say, oh, how dare Concord Pacific, not build on this for 40 years. It's like, you built 85% of the site.
Exactly.
So you're talking about the last 15%. The metrics right now don't make sense because costs have gone up.
And why picking on Concord? There is what's that the casino, the old one that went out of
Starlight
business?
Casino?
No, it's not
Yeah.
the Starlight.
Or,
International, what was it called?
Oh, you're talking
the
about
one
the Canadian
down there,
properties,
yeah.
the one at
Yeah,
Plaza
the other site.
Why aren't they
Nations.
picking on that one as well?
Well, at the end of the
It hasn't
day,
been held as long.
and there was, Concord attempted to get it back. They weren't successful within the court system on that. But it's easy to point the fingers at the big boys.
What is that damn place called?
Plaza
Nation.
Plaza Nation,
yeah. But I mean,
It was a casino at one
It
point,
was,
wasn't it?
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was a casino go to business. You're going to really miss that up.
I think they just moved it. I think they moved it to the park with the nice new.
Oh, is that what it was?
That's what it
yeah,
was.
moved it to
Oh,
the
okay,
park.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
yeah,
I was going to say, like, screwing up a casino is pretty hard. We're talking wasted dollars. There you go.
yeah.
There is in what I was reading there, I do want to read this. This is from I'm going to butcher this because I hate reading stuff straight. But the president of the Real Estate Construction Council of Ontario, ResCon, Richard Leal, whatever his name is, points to a common rhetoric of some to make the developers pay for fees. The reality is the developers do not pay development charges. He says they front it in the beginning because you have to pay these things up front. So whenever the government wants their money, whatever it is. So it looks like the developers pay for it for the uninitiated, but on closing, it all has to come out on the wash, meaning the cost gets passed down to the home buyer. You could be buying a 2-bedroom luxury unit in a Four Seasons type of building. The development charge on that is the same as it is for most affordable 2-bedroom you can find. It doesn't matter how big the 2-bedroom is, says Lyle. It's got nothing to do with income. So immediately, the strangest thing is that people who can least afford housing are getting hammered the most. So that's what I found interesting about this. That we're always, oh my God, how often do you hear affordable housing? It's like every politician in BC, affordable housing, we need this, we need this, we need this. But then as it points out here by ResCon is that whether I'm building a luxury condo, 3,000, whatever the heck thing it is, I'm still getting the same amount of charges, municipal fees and everything. And if I'm trying to do something better for the city with some sort of affordable housing, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, and where does that money go at the end of the day? I mean, you look at the developers in Vancouver, and they've been trying to renegotiate some of the early fees that they had to pay in order to make the site go ahead. And there was that one in the article about, I think, Anthem down on Georgia Street, right? What was their fee? Was it $10 or $15 million, or it was
Really?
significant?
Yeah, it was like crazy.
And they were trying to negotiate, saying, "We'll pay you once we're finished." So it's the amount of capital that the coffers are collected by the government hands. It's astounding.
But I'll give Ken some credit. I know he's postponed that collection of that fee twice now. So I think when you have a pro-development mayor...
Is it going to happen?
Well, I mean, we don't know, but
tariffs,
it's got to get out of the ground, right? It's just right now, it's just a hole. But I mean, it is a viable site that you could build something on it. But I mean, it's to Brian's point, the metrics don't make sense. The taxes are too high. The DC costs are too high. And then let's throw in the art requirement. The beautiful spinning chandelier for $3.5 million.
Have you ever seen it work?
Once.
I've never seen
once.
it once. Not once.
But it's
always broken.
It's just one of these stupid things that we do that
we're out of order sign on it. That's it.
Actually, that would be a great art piece.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like it's bringing common sense. If you want housing built, you got to sit down with the developers. And I mean, this is something I've never seen. And it's a question is why didn't they have like a development summit? Or a housing summit, and you bring all leaders, provincial, federal, and municipal.
Way too much sense.
Right? Why don't you sit them down at the Vancouver Conference Center and you figure this out? And you listen to the guys from UDI and you say, what do you need for us to build housing? And I mean, there's one municipality in Ontario, it's Vaughan, who cut DC permits by 50%. And that's going to be a case study to see how much housing was built, to see if affordable housing was built. We're always going to have certain luxury products in Vancouver, and that's just the reality of being in Vancouver. But it doesn't mean that you got to, when you look at a luxury tower versus, say, a more affordable tower, DC costs should not be the same at all. Or they should be waived.
The municipalities end up fighting against each other for the business, right? If you look at Surrey back in the day, Surrey, when it started blowing up with the towers and Concord took that site off the Korean developer that had gone out there on the Affinity Towers, Surrey was paying for 50% of the curbing costs. The developers loved it. Hey, you're paying part of our costs. We'll build more here.
Sure, of course.
Right? At the end of the day, and Surrey gets it. They get a tax. All the property taxes collected on the new properties built. Look at Burnaby. Their outdoor allotments don't count against their FSRs.
Which is huge,
right? It is.
Patios, they're glorious.
100%, and it makes a ton of sense, right? So it's tough.
In layman's terms, what did you just say? Let's say I don't know all your slingy.
So at the end of the day, like in City of Vancouver, I believe 2% of the developer's outdoor allotment is what balcony spaces are, right? So unless you've got a setback at a garden podium level based on Vancouverism architecture or up at a penthouse, typically you have small balconies in Vancouver. Go to Burnaby right now and look at anything around Brentwood. I mean, we have 1,000 square foot unit with 600 square feet of outdoor space. You look at Concord's site at the greenhouse, and they've got the expandable doors that will go up and down and prevent airflow inside there. And now you've got almost 600 square feet more livable space at the end of the day.
2-3 months of the year more usable.
100%, right? So it's difficult because the municipalities end up competing against each other. I bet you if you look around Vancouver and all of Vancouver right now and go to Burnaby, there's more cranes in Burnaby than there are in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Right? It's wild.
Do we even have a crane in Vancouver right now? I think it's we have Oak Ridge. Yeah, that's about it.
Those cranes aren't doing well.
Yeah, they're not doing well. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that too. Yeah.
I think that's the only one I could think of. We had a bunch of little stuff down on the end of Canby being built.
Yeah.
That's about it.
That's
mini
about
developments.
it.
Fair. But the other thing too is when you really look at it, and if we're going to be pro-development and we're going to bring in all these people, we also need a way to get people out of cars. I remember when Gregor was mayor and everyone was screaming about the bike lanes. But the reality is that we have an expo line from the 86 World's Fair, and we have a Canada line from the 2010.
Heard that thing go by lately? It just sounds like an atomic engine.
Right? Like we should be underground all over the place right now building subways. I'm sorry. And there needs to be federal funding too. I don't understand how today, I think it was Trudeau came out saying that he's going to run an electric train from Toronto to Quebec City.
Yeah.
There's never an announcement about out west what anything is going to happen out here. It's like, let's make some jobs in Ontario and Quebec because they're going to get hurt by tariffs. So we'll put an electric train there.
I mean, you think about the North Shore, right? And
I don't usually think about the North
Shore. Well, I mean, great place to live. I mean, what's crazy and just doesn't make any sense is you say North Shore, you got to build. West Van, you got to build. Okay, give us a rapid transit line. There's a C bus. There's a bridge built in 1900s that'll
probably. Last time you took the C bus?
Well, I've taken it a few times. Obviously, I'm telling you people where I am. But then you look at the bridge from the Lionsgate Bridge. I mean, what's that? That's good in
1930s,
probably
right?
1930s. That's good in a 4.5.
Respan in the early 2000s.
Yeah. So you're that bridge, right? I mean, if they're talking about like seismic and all these other issues, there are no solutions to get off to the North Shore because both of those bridges are down in a 4 to 5 magnitude earthquake, and just the province saying, broad stroke saying everybody needs more density, everybody's got to develop, North Shore, West Van, you're the problem. There's no transit. So why don't you give us a SkyTrain, and it's ridiculous.
Look at the Lionsgate Bridge when it was respanned. The environmentalists did not allow 4 lanes in the causeway because they didn't want trees coming down to Stanley Park. And then 2 years later, we had a windstorm and blew down 3,000 trees.
Yeah, and the moth.
And the what?
And the looper
Yeah,
moth,
the looper
and now
moth,
it's
that's
like
right.
it would have. Hey, you could have put another lane
I
there.
didn't hear about the looper moth.
Oh yeah, that was a few years back.
Yeah,
They
a
were
few years
everywhere.
ago. That's why all the trees in Stanley Park, they had that like windstorm. There's a tree.
Yeah, I
that
remember the
fell
big
across.
windstorm came and everything fell. I didn't know there's some
Yeah.
looper moth.
Oh, they were
killing all
everywhere on the
trees.
North Shore a couple years back.
All I can remember is that Final Destination movie, the Lionsgate Bridge. That's why I don't like driving over it.
Oh, well,
You ever see that one?
yeah, I have. Yeah, oh yeah, with the log track.
B budget, but
Yeah.
still,
Oh yeah,
it was something.
It's a good movie.
That's
Sawa.
our main news for today. And then just to drop this, if you're driving into work today or you're checking your news, Australia banned foreign buyers, much like Canada has, for the next 2 years from buying resale. They can still buy pre-sale, I believe.
No, it was so I've got to read that because Australia, when they came out with it, they had banned foreign buyers previously on resale product, which actually makes good sense.
Sure, okay.
So it's like have them
Stay away from,
buy
like,
new
detached homes, everything.
and right, and it's much like the tax rate here. I was out with a World Top 5 CEO in 2016 when right after Christie had announced a 15% foreign buyers tax, and he's like, "Why would you blanket a tax?" He's like, this makes no sense. He's like, you should scale it. If you want to protect the market for the locals, have it 100% at the bottom so the investors don't buy the bottom end of the market. And at the time back in 2016, at $3 or $4 million, make it no tax, have them come in and consume.
Sure.
But to blanket tax or to ban is a tough one because, I mean, Canada came out with a foreign buyer ban here. We already had a tax in our province.
Tax
right?
plus a ban.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you can buy Whistler, but you can't buy Vancouver.
And Whistler's done now. Like, Whistler prices have gone through the roof.
Oh, great! The $32 million house that was sold. I mean,
39?
yeah, that
$39
yeah.
million house.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's tons
In your-
of those
in
mega
your
houses up.
low municipality there where there's not enough people, so
Right.
it falls under the tax.
25,000
Is
beds.
that what it is?
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing you got to look at is, I mean, Canada has this buyer. I think it's up in 2017. What if the U.S. did this to us?
We'd lose our mind.
Well, but right. So I mean, let's pose the question the other way. I mean, how many snowbirds, how many retirees are down there now? They're madly looking to sell because of a weak dollar. But I think we really need to look at a foreign buyer ban, and as to Brian's point, not just blanket every foreigner as they're the cause of the problem. They're not.
We also did it across Canada, which doesn't make any sense. Because if you follow Instagram or anything, I always send it to my wife. Be like, if you move to Austin, Texas for like $18, you can get this 19-bedroom house on 4 acres. It's just unbelievable the deals they have there, right?
Yeah.
So, we did a blanket ban across Canada, which last time I saw Manitoba and Saskatchewan and all those places still had.
Come and settle
Yeah,
at the end of the day. And that's the challenge, is that the blanketed tax approach and the government tax approach has never solved the issues, right? From the foreign buyer tax that we saw put in here, look what it did to property. Show me a property price in 2016 and show me a property price today in Vancouver.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're not solving with taxes. There's other ways to create solutions.
There you go. That's it for our podcast for today. There will be more coming up, and we hope you enjoyed it. So once again, if you did enjoy it, give us a like, follow, hit whatever the heck you're going to
Subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And you can find Brian Higgins at yvrglobal.com.
Yeah.
And James Duhas at single
Mortgaging Bank.
Hust.
Single
Hust.
loss. Mortgaging Vancouver on Instagram.
There you go. And we're Prompton.com, and follow us, like us, all that stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.